The scorching Arizona sun beat down on the wooden platform in the center of Redemption Springs, casting harsh shadows across the faces of men who'd come to buy what no human being should ever sell. It was 1887, and though slavery had been abolished over 20 years prior, there were still dark corners of the frontier where desperate people made desperate bargains, and the law turned a blind eye to things it shouldn't. Sarah Whitmore stood on that platform with her chin raised and her eyes blazing with a fire that made grown men uncomfortable. At just 19 years old, she wore a dress so threadbare you could see daylight through the fabric, and shoes held together with twine. Her dark hair hung in a single braid down her back, and dirt smudged her hollow cheeks. She'd walked 3 days through the desert after her family's wagon had broken down and fever had taken her parents and younger brother. Alone, starving, and with nowhere to turn, she'd been picked up by a man named Fletcher who promised her food and shelter in exchange for honest work. The honest work, it turned out, was standing on an auction block while Fletcher sold her contract to the highest bidder, a practice that skirted the edges of indentured servitude, technically legal if morally bankrupt. "Do I hear $2? Fletcher's voice rang out across the dusty square. $2 for 5 years of service from a healthy young woman. She can cook, clean, mend, and I'm told she's got schooling too." The crowd of ranch owners, saloon keepers, and mine operators murmured among themselves. $2 was nothing, less than the cost of a decent meal. But 5 years of someone's life? That was everything. "She looks half dead already," one man called out. "I'll give you 50 cents and not a penny more." Sarah's hands trembled, but she kept them clasped tightly in front of her. She wouldn't cry. Wouldn't beg. Her mama had taught her that dignity was the one thing nobody could take from you unless you gave it away. So she stood there like a queen surveying her kingdom, even though she was really a penniless orphan about to be sold for the price of a whiskey bottle. 50 cents. Fletcher spat. "You insult me, sir. This girl's got years of work in her." "I'll give you $1, another voice offered, belonging to a barrel-chested man with a scar running down his face. "My mine needs workers who won't complain." Sarah knew about the mines. She'd heard the stories from other travelers, how men and women went into those dark holes in the earth and came out broken, if they came out at all. Her resolve wavered for just a moment, and she felt tears prick behind her eyes. $1. Fletcher seemed ready to accept when a new voice cut through the crowd. $2. Every head turned toward the speaker. He was an older man, maybe 60, with silver hair beneath a well-worn hat and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore simple rancher's clothes, clean but faded, and carried himself with a quiet authority that made people step aside as he walked toward the platform. $2, he repeated, pulling coins from his pocket. "And I'll take her contract right now." Fletcher's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Sold. To Mr. I'm sorry, I don't believe I caught your name." "Didn't throw it," the man said curtly, counting out the coins into Fletcher's greedy palm. "Name's James McAllister." Sarah felt her heart sink even as Fletcher roughly pushed her toward her new owner. She stumbled on the platform steps, and McAllister reached out to steady her, gently, she noted with surprise. His hand on her elbow was firm but kind. "Can you ride?" he asked her directly, the first person all day to speak to her rather than about her. "Yes, sir," Sarah managed, her voice hoarse from thirst and disuse. "Good. We've got a ways to go." He turned to where a beautiful chestnut mare stood tied to a post. "That's Copper. She'll carry you." As Sarah approached the horse on unsteady legs, a woman's voice called out from the crowd. "James McAllister, have you lost your mind? $2 might not be much, but it's $2 thrown away on a girl who looks liable to drop dead before sundown." McAllister didn't even turn around. "Then it's my $2 to waste, Martha. Good day to you." He helped Sarah into the saddle, actually helped her, with his hands laced together to give her a boost, as if she were a lady instead of bought goods. Then he mounted his own horse, a sturdy black gelding, and they rode out of Redemption Springs without another word. They rode for over an hour in silence, Sarah clinging to the saddle horn and trying not to fall off as waves of exhaustion and hunger washed over her. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, when McAllister finally spoke. "There's water in the canteen on your saddle. Drink slow." Sarah's hands shook as she reached for it, and the first sip of cool water was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but she heeded his warning and took small, measured sips. "Thank you," she whispered. "No need for thanks. Water's a necessity, not a kindness." His voice was gruff but not unkind. "My ranch is another hour ahead. When we get there, my housekeeper Mrs. Chen will get you fed and cleaned up. Tomorrow we'll talk about your duties." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd expected cruelty, or at least coldness, but there was something in James McAllister's manner that confused her. He didn't treat her like property. He treated her like, well, she wasn't sure what. But it wasn't what she'd expected. As the ranch came into view, a sprawling house built of adobe and wood, with several outbuildings and corrals filled with horses, Sarah felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. Sarah woke the next morning in a real bed for the first time in weeks, her body aching but her stomach finally full. Mrs. Chen, a kind-faced Chinese woman with silver threading through her black hair, had fed her vegetable soup and fresh bread the night before, then shown her to a small but clean room in the workers' quarters. "Mr. McAllister, he's a good man," Mrs. Chen had said in careful English. "You work hard, you treated fair here. You see." Now, as dawn light filtered through the simple curtains, Sarah rose and dressed in the clean clothes that had been left for her, sturdy work dress, proper shoes, even an apron. Everything was worn but serviceable, and everything fit. Someone had taken care to find the right sizes. She found McAllister in the barn, already at work mucking out stalls. He looked up when she entered, nodded once, and pointed to a pitchfork. "You'll help with the horses. Feeding, grooming, mucking stalls. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. McAllister will do, or James if you're comfortable with it." He returned to his work. "We take breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, supper at 6. Sundays you get the afternoon off. You'll bunk with Mrs. Chen and help her with house duties when the barn work is light." Sarah picked up the pitchfork, waiting for the rest, the rules about not speaking unless spoken to, about staying out of sight, about knowing her place. But McAllister just went back to work, humming quietly under his breath. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah worked hard, harder than she'd ever worked, but it was honest work and nobody raised a hand to her or spoke cruel words. McAllister treated her the same way he treated his other two ranch hands, Miguel, a Mexican cowboy with a quick smile, and Jacob, a freed slave who'd headed west after the war. They all ate meals together at the same table. They all got the same portions. They all had a voice in how the ranch was run. It was so different from what Sarah had expected that it took her almost 2 weeks to begin to relax, to believe that this wasn't some elaborate trick that would end in betrayal. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Sarah was grooming Copper in the barn when she overheard voices from outside. She recognized one as belonging to Martha, the woman who'd questioned McAllister's purchase in town. "I'm just saying, James, people are talking. You bought that girl's contract and then you treat her like hired help instead of putting her to proper use. You could have her working in the house full-time, or you could sell her contract to someone who'd get their money's worth. $2 might not seem like much to you, but some of us count every penny." "Then I'm fortunate I don't have to count mine so carefully," McAllister replied, his voice carrying that edge of steel Sarah had learned meant the conversation was over. But Martha persisted. "You always were too soft-hearted, James. Ever since Eleanor died, you've been trying to save every broken thing that crosses your path. But that girl isn't your daughter, and Charity doesn't run a ranch." There was a long silence. Sarah held her breath, waiting. When McAllister finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "You're right, Martha. She's not my daughter. Eleanor's been gone 5 years now, and nothing will bring her back. But I'll tell you something, every time I see Sarah working hard, taking pride in what she does, holding her head up despite everything she's been through, I see what Eleanor would have wanted me to see. Dignity. Courage. The kind of strength that has nothing to do with money or position. You paid $2 for a contract, James. That makes her a human being who had a run of bad luck and needed help. The contract? Sarah heard the sound of paper tearing. I burned it 3 days after I brought her here. She stays because she chooses to, and she works for wages same as Miguel and Jacob. $2 bought her freedom, Martha, not her servitude. I'd pay $2 1,000 times over to help someone start again. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The contract was gone. She was free. She'd been free almost from the beginning and hadn't even known it. She worked the rest of the evening in a daze, barely aware of what she was doing. After supper, when the others had retired for the evening, she found McAllister sitting on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "Sir, McAllister," she corrected herself, her voice shaking. "I heard you talking with Martha earlier. About the contract." He didn't look at her, just kept watching the sky. "Did you now?" "Why?" The word burst from her. "Why did you do it? You could have gotten 5 years of work from me. You could have done a lot of things," he interrupted gently. "But none of them would have let me sleep at night." Finally, he turned to look at her, and in his eyes, she saw a grief that had softened into wisdom. "My Eleanor, my daughter, she died of fever 5 years back. She was about your age, and she had your same fire, that determination not to be broken by circumstances. When I saw you on that platform, chin up, eyes blazing even though you were terrified, I saw her. Saw what she would have wanted me to do. I would have worked for you," Sarah said softly. "For 5 years, I would have given you honest labor. I know you would have. But I didn't want your obligation, child. I wanted to give you what every person deserves, a choice. You're free to go anytime. You're also free to stay, as a paid hand, if that's what you want. Either way, you're nobody's property. You're Sarah Whitmore, and you get to decide your own path." Sarah sat down on the porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. All her life, she'd been taught that the world was harsh and unforgiving, that people only helped when they had something to gain. But here was a man who'd gained nothing except the satisfaction of doing right. "I'd like to stay," she said finally. "If the offer's genuine. I'd like to learn ranching, earn my wages, make something of myself." "Offer's genuine. Always will be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert night wrap around the ranch. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice stronger now. "That $2 you spent, I'm going to make sure it changes more than just my life. Someday, when I have my own place, my own means, I'm going to help someone else the way you helped me. I'm going to pass it forward." McAllister smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Now that would make it the best $2 I ever spent." 6 years later, Sarah Whitmore owned her own small ranch, purchased with money she'd earned and saved. She was known throughout the territory as a fair employer and a fierce advocate for those who'd fallen on hard times. She'd helped dozens of people start over, asking nothing in return except that they do the same for someone else when they could. People said she'd built her success from nothing, but Sarah knew better. She'd built it from $2, a torn-up contract, and one man's belief that every person deserved dignity and a second chance. She'd built it from the example James McAllister had set, showing her that true wealth wasn't measured in money but in the lives you touched and the hope you kindled. And every morning, when she watched the sunrise paint her land in gold, she remembered the day she'd stood on an auction block in Redemption Springs. She remembered the fire she'd felt then, not the fire of anger or desperation, but the fire of determination that nobody could extinguish. That fire had been worth $2 to one man who saw it, and it had grown into a beacon that guided others out of darkness. Sarah kept a wooden box on her desk with $2 silver inside, preserved and polished. Whenever someone asked about them, she told them the story. Told them how the smallest gesture of kindness could change everything. Told them that what you're worth has nothing to do with what someone pays for you, and everything to do with how you choose to live when someone gives you the chance. The Wild West was a harsh place, full of hard people doing hard things to survive. But it was also a place where legends were born from simple acts of human decency. And the legend of Sarah Whitmore, the woman bought for $2 whose pride and perseverance inspired a territory, proved that sometimes the smallest investment yields the greatest return, not in gold or silver, but in the immeasurable currency of hope restored and dignity reclaimed. Her story spread across campfires and through saloons, not as a tale of victim and savior, but as a testament to what happens when someone sees your worth even when the world has decided you're worthless. James McAllister had seen Sarah's fire and chosen to tend it rather than extinguish it. And that choice, that simple act of recognizing another person's humanity, had set off a chain reaction that touched countless lives. Because in the end, that's what kindness does. It doesn't just change one life, it ripples outward, touching everyone it reaches,